आगे बढ़ते हैं और आपके दिल्ली के इंडिया इंटरनेशनल सेंटर लिए चलते हैं, जहां किताब का विमोचन हो रहा है। डॉक्टर ऐश्वर्या पंडित की किताब क्लेमिंग सिटीजनशिप एंड नेशन की बात इसलिए भी जरूरी हो जाती है क्योंकि ये किताब मुस्लिम राजनीति को, खासकर उत्तर प्रदेश में, बारीकी से पकड़ती है। मुस्लिम सांप्रदायिकता के पनपने की कड़ियों को भी जोड़ती है ये किताब।
Political science in London between 2008 and 2009. An assistant professor teaching legal history at Jindal Global Law School, OP Jindal Global University, Dr. Pandit is the tour de force of academic initiatives at the EduTech platform First in Class. She was awarded the BRICS CCI Trailblazer Felicitation for Philanthropy in April of this year. And now, amid a huge round of applause, I request Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, the author, to join us on the stage for a few words.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for taking out time for attending the book launch and for encouraging new authors like me. The encouragement means a lot and has allowed me to dare and write a second book with HarperCollins to be published sometime next year. I would also like to thank our esteemed panelists for their time and agreeing to discuss the book with me. This will only encourage me to write often and to write better. This book is an outcome of several years of training and labor, which started during my first years as a PhD student at Cambridge. The politics of North India, and in particular Muslim politics, is an issue of debate and discussion for as long as I can remember. And the book picks on themes which are at the heart of contemporary Indian politics. I hope you enjoy reading the book as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone and all those people who are a part of this journey. As my supervisor, Professor Joya Chatterjee, would say, the best books are those which are complete. So I would like to thank her, for, my supervisor, for guiding me throughout my time at Cambridge. I would also like to thank my publisher, Routledge India and UK, for helping me with the manuscript, copy editing, and most importantly, timely publishing the book. I would also like to thank my in-laws, Rani and Vinod Sharma, for their love and encouragement while I spent countless hours on numerous drafts of the book. My friends Divyani Gupta, Soumya Saxena, and Ali Khan have been constant companions while I wrote and rewrote and debated my conclusions. I'm indebted to them. My father, Kuldeep Sharma, always ready for a debate and a healthy argument. I'd like to thank him for being patient when our arguments were no longer healthy. My mother, Neelam, for her sheer belief in me and the book I could write, and the fact that I could write more books. Book writing is, as several people who are accomplished authors know, is a long journey on which you must have companions. My mother was a constant one. My brother, Chanakya Pandit, and my son Aruna and daughter Anyashri have been incredibly proud of me in their own way. And I'd like to tell them I'd strive to be better. Finally, this book would not have been possible without the support of my husband, Karthik. Karthik has always believed in my work. We've had countless discussions on different themes of the book. The discussions helped me articulate my ideas better and arrange my thoughts in the final stages of writing of this book. Writing a book is harder than I thought, punctured with too many moments of self-doubt. Karthik ensured that I was never bogged down and was patient every time I felt anxious about the outcome of this book. Such unflinching support is a rare commodity these days. I'm deeply indebted to him for that. My repeated absence for research trips and finishing my PhD at Cambridge were greeted with his warm smile and unwavering support at every stage of my career. Thank you, Karthik, for everything. Once again, I'd like to thank all my friends, colleagues at Jindal Global Law School, and to everyone who's taken time out to attend this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandit. I request you to just, stay on stage as we welcome our panelists for this evening, I now invite to the stage Professor Madhav Nalapath, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. We also have amongst us Mr. Shahid Siddiqui, Senior Journalist and former Rajya Sabha MP. Lastly, I'd like to invite Mr. Shashadri Chari, Chairman, China Studies Center, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Before we begin the discussion, I would request all the guests to just take the book in their hands and pose for a quick photograph. I now request Professor Madhav Nalapath to begin the much-awaited discussion for this evening.
Thank you. Would you like me to sit down and do it, or? Thank you very much. I'd like to say that I spent a considerable amount of time on reading this book. It's a difficult book. Not for the manner it was written in a very, very lucid style, but because the subject is such a difficult subject that frankly, in our country, we almost avoid, in a sense, a discussion of this subject. The fact that the country was completely partitioned on the 14th and 15th of August, 1947. And I think, that is where I found the book so very helpful, because obviously it had been partitioned. Obviously, there were multiple reasons behind that. Some reasons that some people like me would agree with, some reasons which I would have felt was unreasonable. In fact, I'm so happy that my co-discussant, Shahid Siddiqui, his family has lived through that period, participated in that period, and especially as very staunch members of the Congress Party and staunch believers in a united India. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of the Indian people, no matter what their religion, Hindu and Muslim, they believed in a united India. Now, you had, for example, you had a party, the Muslim League, you had the Congress Party. Let's be honest, people talk about parties that are run by individuals or whatever it is. They're talking, some of us have written about the Congress Party even during the past. But the reality is that this kind of a situation is not uncommon in India. And long back, you had the Mahatma, then you had Pandit Nehru. And this book is so fascinating because it shows how Pandit Nehru essentially stood in opposition to the strongest state, the most consequential state at that time and this time in Indian politics, Uttar Pradesh. And the opinion of the party there, and the party leadership, the party rank and file, definitely the rank and file in across the country, and he stood in opposition to that. And there's a question which, as I said, I've been searching for an answer. And after a long time, I've been getting an answer in Aishwarya's book. It's an absolutely fascinating read in the context of the terrible event that split our country apart, and which, including, I'm sure, some families here, have been the victims of. And we are all of us, Shahid, all of us, we have that trauma of that period. In this book, you can understand something of the background, something of the socio-political, faith-based skein of events that are a part and parcel of that tragedy. I'm very happy that Aishwarya has tackled such a difficult subject. Frankly, my advice to PhD students, and I don't know if I should say this publicly, I think I should probably, Sheshadri, I better not. and you better not report this to our colleagues in Manipal. Look, the way I've talked to them, a degree is something that is used as an entry card. And you work on a subject that you're comfortable with, that you find a guide that you're comfortable with, and make sure that you have a comfortable ride through the subject, through your doctorate, and then you come back. In fact, I persuaded I've been quite a lot of people have done doctorates, dozens of people, and this has been my advice. Aishwarya never asked for my advice, but if she had asked for it, she would not have followed it at all. She has taken absolutely the most contrarian stance to what my advice was. It's only a degree. Find some easy subject, work on it, find a nice guide who's open to, to helping you help that process. And, in every university, I think we have got a human heart and we help the students. And the fact is, that entire process of discovery and journey, discovery of oneself, discovery of one's scholastic abilities is as important, I would say, as the subject matter. And from that point of view, but I'm sure that Aishwarya today, the views that she's expressing today, and she's expressed for some years, today, will be very different from the views that she was expressing when she began work on this particular book. Because she has seen so much. And what is very important is that journey that is taken through a very troubled, important period of our history that is still very much with us. Now, there are some questions in my mind. Some have been answered in this book. Some I'd like to, for example, ask Aishwarya to sit down and do some research and maybe write a third book on that. And one of them is, Pandit Nehru, an admirable person, one of the world leaders, an individual who ensured that India was one of the shining stars in the world. Today it also is there, but in that period we had just come out of terrible colonization. We had no economy, and his, I may say so, his indomitable spirit was very important. But if you look at Pandit Nehru and you study his career, vis-a-vis the Muslim League, for example, pre-partition, and you study his career in minority politics after partition, it's almost like two Pandit Nehrus. It's not the same individual. And sometimes I wonder, was partition inevitable? I know Churchill wanted it. I know Jinnah, who frankly, was about as observant a Muslim as I am observant as a Hindu, which is, I hardly go to temples. My wife goes to a lot of temples. So the average of our temple going is pretty substantial. So, so for both of us it's pretty good. But the fact of the matter is, he was very negative about either parties that he thought had a Hindu bias or a Muslim bias. He was very strong on the Muslim League, very strong on Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And of course, Gandhiji felt that he spoke his language, so Gandhiji supported him. And at that point in time, Gandhiji was the Congress party in terms of the pilot of the Congress party. The control tower was Mahatma Gandhi. But if he had had this attitude that he had after independence, before independence, could we have avoided this catastrophe? Because his attitude was one of uncompromising, and Aishwarya has brought that out very well indeed in this book from 47 to 86. I would like to, in my next conversation to find out why exactly this cutoff point 86, but it makes sense. Because that was the point, in my view, when somehow, the kind of divisions or whatever, a wound that had never really healed, it was openly being seen as a wound. And my point is, in India, we believe in Maya, in illusion, we believe in self-pretense, we believe that we believe in wounds that are not there. We believe in that we have, that there are no wounds when wounds are there. But this terrible wound has always been there. But after 1950, 51, 55, it's almost as though we decided that we will not even understand that this wound is there. We will just forget about it. We will forget about partition. We'll forget it ever happened. And we'll pretend that nothing like this ever happened. At least from my limited understanding of Indian history post-independence, that's my view. But the reality is, many things did happen. And what I like about this particular book, it analyzes it very clinically, extremely clinically, in a way which is completely independent of any kind of, if I may say so, any kind of a bias towards faith or towards politics or anything of the kind. It's a very clinical analysis of a situation after a tremendous wound had been inflicted on the subcontinent. A wound that we cannot ignore. A wound that we must look at straight in the eye to draw lessons from it and to understand so that it never comes back to us. And I think I would like to say, it took me a little while, Aishwarya, frankly, to read this book through. I couldn't do it at one shot, which is the way I normally read books, in one evening or on one flight. I didn't even read on a flight. I read 3 or 4 pages and said, sorry, I can't, concentrate on this and on a flight. So I concentrated on the flight, and luckily my wife these days travels a lot with me, so it was not very difficult. But it's a difficult book to read, but not for the way it's written, but for the subject and for the subtext and the context, which is mercilessly revealed in the book. So I'd like to say I was very happy to come here and be part of the discussion, and especially I'm very happy to come among, 2 friends of mine. I mean, they're good friends of mine. I don't know if Shahid and Sheshadri will admit to being friends of mine, but they're definitely very good and old and wonderful and very loving friends of mine. And I must say, both of us. My wife and myself, Shahid and Shadan, and of course, the Charis. So I'd like to say I was very happy. I was happy to read this book. I was not happy reading it. Not because of your writing, but because of the subject. And it brought back to me so much which I thought, could we have avoided this? And it's a question that has followed me practically every week of my life for about, I would say, 30, 40 years. Every day, every week you ask yourself, could this have been avoided? How could it have been avoided? Actually, your book is a pointer to what was not avoided. Therefore, it's a pointer to what could have been avoided. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for writing this. I know it was difficult, but I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to only say, it has not been an easy book to read. And it's because it's a part of our history that we cannot afford to forget for the sake of the future of the young generation today and the generation yet to come. We cannot afford to brush it under the carpet as it has been brushed so many times. It has been brought out of the carpet in full view by Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, and I'm very, very happy to be part of this discussion. Thank you, Aishwarya.
It's an open house, or you are going to ask questions?
Shahid bhai, what about you? You lived through this, your family lived through this.
Yes. I totally agree with Mr. Narapat that it's a wound which has been simmering, and it's still an open wound. It's high time that we face it, and we face the ugly reality of partition, which damaged this Indian society, India as an idea more, but especially Uttar Pradesh, because this battle was fought mainly in Uttar Pradesh, not in Punjab, not so much in Bengal. Yes, it was fought in Bengal, Punjab, of course, Sindh, but more in Uttar Pradesh, where the main battles of communalism, of casteism, of language politics, starting from the time of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and Malviya ji in end of the 19th century, Hindi-Urdu battle, and the battle of Muslim university emerging and a Hindu university emerging, and the British trying to create these two universities. Earlier there were no Hindu universities or Muslim universities. These universities came to the fore only at that end of that period and started a movement of Hindu and Muslim nationalism. It was Hindu, and there was no idea of nationalism in India the way we understand a nation. Before that, the idea of nation has gradually evolved with this idea of a Hindu university and a Muslim university, a Urdu society and a Hindi society, which was unreal, but this unreal division has led to one of the worst reality in which we still are going through. And let me also add that we, Indian Muslims, have suffered much more because of the partition than anyone else. Because it divided Muslims, they have become aliens in where they migrated to, some of them migrated to, and they are aliens in their homeland. They are aliens both places, and they are suffering all through. But UP Muslims are blamed. Many of my Pakistani friends whom I meet, they say, "Tumne kara diya partition, tumhari wajah se ho gaya." They don't want to take the responsibility of the partition. So responsibility is given on Indian Muslims from Uttar Pradesh. And I have always thought about it, because my father joined Congress party in 1917 and was a journalist, was with the national movement, and left the Congress in 1951 when Purushottam Das Tandon became the Congress president, and Rafi Ahmed Kidwai, Ashok Mehta, Majid Prasad Jain, and these people, because these are the names I have been hearing from my childhood from my father, they resigned because they thought that the Congress party had become Hindu Mahasabha and went out. And that is where the real struggle was taking place within the Congress party. It was not, the partition was taking place within the Congress party, the battle between those who were for partition, those who were for against partition. It is a huge battle within the Congress party as well, and especially Uttar Pradesh Congress. And I'm so happy that Aishwarya has been able to bring out all those incidents, all that happened, and has given a lot of food for thought, because we really must face and overcome what we have been going through and avoiding it. Let's not push it under the carpet anymore. Let's face the reality of the partition and get over with it and try to build a nation which we have always been trying to build. Here, I would like to add one thing, Aishwarya, that yes, UP Muslims played more, were more active because they were fearing emergence of a democratic India much more than the Muslims who were in majority Muslim areas of Punjab or Sindh or Bengal. So they played an important role. But you have to understand one thing. There is nothing like a Muslim. There was an upper class, and you have brought it out in your book, there was an upper caste Muslims, the Ashrafs and the Ajals. These Ashrafs dominate. And who were these Ashrafs? They were the feudal classes, the landed Nawabs and the Zamindars. And these landed Zamindars were fearing democracy, were fearing Congress party, fearing the socialism of Nehru, the idea that Zamindari will be abolished and was being abolished. And it was they who, not in the beginning, were not with the Muslim League. They opposed Muslim League. They were with the Congress, they were with other organizations. But by the mid of, or say, beginning of the 1940s, they started moving towards Muslim League. Why? Because it was for their own vested interests. They had no idea what exactly the Pakistan will be and what Pakistan is going to be. And these people, when they joined Muslim League, they contested the elections. And what was the election? I think somebody should write a book on the elections in 1946, in 1937, 1946, because it was not adult franchise. Hardly less than 20%. If I may be wrong, it was 13 or 14% of Muslims who had the right to vote. Who were these Muslims? Those who had property, those who paid income tax. Who was paying income tax? Basically the landed people, or those who were graduates. Who were the graduates? Again, those coming from the Nawabs and the Zamindars. So these were the voters. Not the majority of Muslims, of the Ansaris, the Qurayshis, the artisans, the poor Muslims, who were mainly with Mahatma Gandhi, who were the followers of Mahatma Gandhi, who started with Mahatma Gandhi, or followers of the Deoband movement. the followers of the Maulanas of the Devband movement who were against the idea of partition, who were bitterly against Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So these Muslims contested the elections and these Muslims voted. But even then you have to go into it that what was the percentage of votes Muslim League got. We only talk about the seats they got in 1946, not the percentage of votes they got. Moreover, there was no election commission. These were the first elections. जमींदार खड़ा है तो किसी की हिम्मत है कि वोट डाल देगा किसी के खिलाफ? आज भी यही हाल है. In those times, election का मतलब है हो गया वोट जाओ घर जाओ. So those were not free and fair elections. The 46 election, which was the basis of partition, was not free and fair. Was not for everybody to vote. It was a certain class which was voting, so it was a certain class which was voting for the landlords, not for Pakistan, not for Muslim League, not for Jinnah. They were voting in their area for their zamindar. That is the point which we must understand, we must go into. Because to blame the poor Muslims of Uttar Pradesh or targeting them for the deep wound of partition, which has, deeply hurt India. It was any other country, there would have been much, much more bloodshed. And I appreciate this society, this country, the people of this country who were able to take this in their stride and move forward. And there I give a lot of credit to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He stood up to his own leaders, the whole leadership in Uttar Pradesh, whether it was Govind Sahaji, or it was Panji, Govind Vallabh Panji, or it was Charan Singh ji and others, who C.B. Gupta ji, who were standing up to Mahatma Gandhi. They were able to get Purushottam Das Tandon elected as the Congress president despite the fact that Panditji totally opposed him. But they were able to get him elected. So that was the situation where Panditji stood up. Why? One question Monu asked, why Panditji did that? Panditji realized that if you have to build India, you have to see that, especially Uttar Pradesh, the heart of India. And Uttar Pradesh means moving on to Bihar. Continuing towards Bihar and going down towards Madhya Pradesh, but Indian heart and mind of India lies in Uttar Pradesh. Whether some people like it or not, but that's a fact, reality. That's where our politics has been dominated, especially our democratic politics. Since we have moved towards democratic politics, that is where our politics has dominated. And that's where Panditji stood up when this, in 1949, this Ajodhya thing happened, when some of these murtis were placed in the Babri Masjid structure, or whatever you want to call it. I don't mind if you call it a mandir or a masjid. It's not, the point is not that. The point is that a controversy arose. And Panditji stood up to, Shastriji was the home minister at that time. He stood up to him, asked him to take a stand, but because of UP politics, he could not do that. Although his roots lay in Uttar Pradesh, he could not, direct UP politics the way he wanted to. One reason was that the socialists, who were great supporters of Pandit Nehru, they had parted and moved out. Then people like Rafi Ahmed Kidwai, who was again a socialist, and people with him, Ajit Prasad Jain and others, who again were not ready to fight back. They were fighting Pandit Nehru more than they were fighting the right wing within the Congress party. So these things have happened, but we are at a juncture where we have to really find out how and why the partition, because partition, I am very confident that partition was not inevitable. It could have definitely been avoided. There was no reason to go for partition. If we went for the partition, there must be more extraneous reasons than the real reasons, because real reasons I do not see. Whatever I have read, whatever I have heard and known from people who were involved at that time, because I was lucky to be born in a family of the freedom movement. Maulana Hasrat Mohani lived his last days he spent in Balli Maharan, in my house and in my family, one of the great leaders of the national movement who gave the idea, of Mukammal Swaraj and whatever he said, and then the slogan of Inqilab Zindabad, etc., etc. And one of the great, he was one of the founders of the Communist Party in Kanpur. So from Communist, he moved to Congress and ultimately to Muslim League, and then he didn't go. He didn't go to Pakistan. He didn't believe in the idea of Pakistan. So that's where I was able to, from my childhood, see these discussions taking place. And I can assure you that most of the Muslims today have, even earlier, I'm talking of 50s and 60s. Now, I'm 72 now, so I was able to, because I was always sitting with my father as a child, and I went to see Panditji, Govind Vallabh Pantji, Sampurnanandji, and these people used to come to our house and have long discussions. I can assure you that they were never happy, and they never believed that partition was inevitable. They believed that partition was one of the biggest mistakes. But we must also not blame Indian Muslims. We must understand that Indian Muslims, the elite, which moved out, and that was again biggest damage done to India and to Indian Muslims when the elite, the educated elite, the landed elite went out and went to Pakistan, but not the common Muslims here. So these common Muslims should not be blamed. We have to understand. I mean, I'm not saying that they were not responsible. Everybody was responsible. The Congress was responsible. The Hindu Mahasabha was responsible. Everybody contributed. But it could have been avoided. And today, when we are in a situation where these things are becoming so difficult, people without understanding history, without realizing history, are at loggerheads with each other. It's important that we bring to the fore the reasons, the situations, and then able to build a new India, which we always have wanted to. And there, I think, everybody has contributed. And today, I mean, Pandit Nehru was... I wrote my thesis on Nehru in my MA, the concept of socialism. And I believe in my thesis I was able to explain that Nehru was not just a socialist. He was more influenced by Vedanta thought. He was more influenced by Vedic thoughts. And I have been able to bring out in my thesis that how that was the case. It was not just Fabian socialism which was influencing Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It was much more than that. And he had deep roots and understanding of the idea of India. And instead of, rejecting Nehru or his ideas, we must understand the situation in which he was forced into, or maybe he made a mistake. People make mistakes. A lot of us have made mistakes. But I think it was the right and left leadership of Congress and even of the other parties who may be responsible for the partition. But I congratulate Aishwarya for working on these ideas and once again provoking us to go into, and as Monu said, you must write a third book, and the third book should be on, especially I have been wanting somebody to do a research on how Muslims behaved and what was the pattern of voting in 1935, 37 and 46, especially 37 was a different election. Muslims voted very differently. And 46, they were voting differently, especially in Uttar Pradesh, even in Punjab. If you see earlier in Punjab and Sindh, Muslims voted for Krishak Mazdoor Party, or in Sindh they voted for, I'm forgetting the name. Unionist was in Punjab. Unionist was in Punjab, Chotu Ram, and there you had one chief minister who was assassinated, Muslim chief minister who was opposing Muslim League to the hilt in Sindh, and he was very strong, but he was assassinated. Same in Bengal, but then overnight, you see, in Punjab and in Sindh, the Congress के बोर्ड जो थे उस पे उलट के पीछे मुस्लिम लीग लिख के रातों रात लगा दिया गया. जो कांग्रेस के दफ्तर थे वो मुस्लिम लीग के दफ्तर बन गए जब लगा के पार्टीशन होने वाला. My father was one of those people who was editing a paper from Lahore in 1945. He was editing a paper in Lahore, and when he realized that partition is inevitable and they are going that way, he migrated from Lahore to Delhi. तो हम भी शरणार्थी हैं जो कि लाहौर से यहाँ पर आए, क्योंकि people like my father did not, and a lot of followers of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, one of the famous man, Shah Rukh Khan's father, he migrated from there because they refused to live in a Pakistan. And I from my childhood, I knew so many people, especially the Pathans and the Peshawaris, who had migrated to India and suffered here and lived in terrible life, but they refused to stay in Pakistan of Jinnah because they hated the idea of partition, the idea of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much I'd only say that I have also got some views on Pandit Nehru, apart from the fact that he was virulently opposed to the Muslim League and to the. I'm sure you will. But what I want to see, very frankly, is no, it's not going. Yeah, I'd only like to say that these are very interesting points of view that Shahid Bhai said, and I'd also like, if you don't mind, to give Sheshadri a chance to speak, and that is precisely what I'm saying. So I'd request him also to give his views on the subject. I'm sorry that, we are discussing subjects in a way, but this is exactly what the book is doing. It's discussing subjects in an extremely open way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. It's always said that a good book is one which has a beginning but no end. Because a book is supposed to be thought-provoking. It should not end. It should not conclude. It should make you think and go beyond what the author wants to say or what the author has said. So from that point of view, I think we would all agree that what Aishwarya has written has prompted and will continue to prompt all of us to think beyond and go far beyond this book. So from that point of view, I think you deserve greatest of the congratulations for bringing out this book. I was only wondering about two things. 47 is the beginning from where you have made. And as Monu very rightly said, when you are doing a thesis, you have to have, especially when you are doing a thesis on a particular subject which has a time period, you have to determine the time where the subject ends. So you begin from 46 and you have gone up to 1986. So I was wondering, I was just browsing through some of the pages and I couldn't find why you ended it at 86. I'm sure you will have some reason for it. Yeah. Yeah, Shaban is one of the things because I got the copy of the book by email, so I could read. So 86 also, of course, becomes an important aspect. But as I said, 86 does not conclude the book. 86 is again another beginning as far as this whole issue is concerned. But after going through some of the items, I wanted to make 4 points. I must admit that I haven't read the book from cover to cover. It takes a lot of time, as Monu very rightly said. This is not a book that you can read in the flights, and I will have to start traveling more by train if I want to read this book. So what is more important is, to begin with, we start from 47. All through the book, you have very rightly, of course, referred to the Hindu-Muslim divide. I think it's the most unfortunate part of partition, as Shahid also said. The most unfortunate part of partition is that the partition is blamed on Hindu-Muslim divide. Was partition only because of Hindu-Muslim divide? Was that the reason why India was partitioned? Was that the only reason, as this book very rightly argues, and with a lot of proof, I must really admit. I teach in Manipal and I correct a lot of theses written by my students. And I always tell them, when you make a statement, either prove it or give a reference. either you take the blame or blame it on somebody else. That is what we say. So everywhere wherever you have quoted, you have done a very right job. But then I think we will also have to really seriously start thinking whether partition was only due to Hindu-Muslim divide. When we treat the whole subject, when we discuss the entire subject, when you write a book on that subject, on the premise that partition was the result of Hindu-Muslim divide, then that becomes probably one of the biggest accusations, an injustice to Muslims in this country. Did every Muslim in this country demand partition? No. In page number 197, you have quoted that Muslim politics continues to be defined in a rather elitist way, as Shahid very rightly said. And you said, lastly and most importantly, everything that was blamed on Muslim was actually not so, because so-and-so, Babri Masjid was never an issue for common Muslims, and more so outside Uttar Pradesh. It's quoted. If I were to say partition was never an issue for common Muslims and more so outside Uttar Pradesh, it would not be very wrong. So let us, I think somewhere, as I said, a good book is one that does not end. Somewhere it gives us a thought that should we really continue to study partition only from the point of view of Hindu-Muslim divide? Which it is not. And then Shahid Bhai spoke about homeland. Of course, homeland is not mentioned here. I am not putting it on your book, it's his words. Homeland, when we talk of homeland, is Pakistan the homeland of all Muslims? No. Is India the homeland of all Hindus? No. Of course, we know one Prime Minister and one Deputy Prime Minister who was not born in India. They were in Pakistan. They were born in Pakistan. So, this whole issue of apportionment, putting Hindus and Muslims in pigeonholes, this was another major problem that the book is dealing with, and you have very rightly dealt with that issue also in a number of places. So that also gives us a thought to proceed, whether we should really be looking at Hindus and Muslims in this particular framework, the homeland framework. The third issue that I would suggest, especially I was reading through one or two references to communal politics. Now, the third aspect that this book actually deals with, in many sub-chapters, I have not marked down those pages, so I'm sorry I will not be able to really quote from the pages. But what is important is the politicization of communities. Now, politicization of communities have happened in different aspects. One is the caste and one is the community, or rather religion. The word community is a very wrong word. Actually, Karl Marx also suggested communism, community, communal living. So Karl Marx's communalism was different from Hindu-Muslim communalism. So the words are the same, but the references and the context differ. Therefore, the reference to the idea of communalism, wherever you have treated the word communalism, is attributed to Hindu and Muslim. Now, the politicization of these religious groups, if I may say so, again that's a problem. When we say religious group, is Hindu a single religious group is another question. But we broadly speaking in terms of religion, when we say the politicization. Now, when did this politicization start? What was the time or what were those factors where it was believed, I am not saying it happened, it was believed that Hindus voted for Janasangh or BJP and Muslims voted for the Congress. As Shahid Bhai very rightly said, all Muslims did not vote for Muslim League. All Muslims did not vote for Congress. And not that all Hindus voted. In fact, the best blame that Jinnah made on the Congress was that it is a Hindu party. So he said, we don't want to have any truck with a Hindu party. And there was no Janasangh at that time when he said Hindu party. Janasangh was born after 3.5 years after Jinnah died. So there was no Janasangh for him to blame. So he blamed Congress as a Hindu party. And mind you, Janasangh was not a Hindu party. Janasangh did not had that communal tag. I had a very close working relationship with Atalji, so I used to go through some of his speeches. So in one of that, he said that जनसंघ को तो किसी ने हिंदू पार्टी नहीं कहा, he said. तो मैंने कहा आप कैसे कहते हैं? देखिए, हम जनसंघ के समय में हम तो हमारा पल्ला पड़ता था श्रीमती गांधी से, इंदिरा गांधी से. तो एक बार इंदिरा गांधी जी ने कह दिया कि ये बनियों की पार्टी है, बनिया पार्टी है. So we used to, Janasangh was always blamed as traders party, बनिया party. तो अटल जी asked me, उन्होंने क्यों ऐसा कहा? Then he himself answered. He said, पूरे देश में 1 या 2% होंगे बनिए. उनमें से भी जो चुनाव में वोट देने जाते हैं वो और कम होंगे. अब पूरे देश में 1% लोगों को आप जनसंघ को दे देते हैं, तो बाकी जो 99% हिंदू हैं वो तो कांग्रेस के साथ ही रहेंगे. इसीलिए आप श्रीमती इंदिरा गांधी ने कभी भी जनसंघ को हिंदू पार्टी कह के हिंदू समाज को जनसंघ के पलड़े में नहीं डाला. So that was a very wonderful idea, and I think somewhere you can probably think, yeah, you have written about it. I saw it in one reference. I'm not able to place the page number. You would probably know better, or your professor would know. So श्रीमती गांधी उन्होंने एक बार अटल जी ने मजाक में कहा भी कि मेरे समझ में नहीं आता है कि श्रीमती गांधी कहती है कि बनिया पार्टी है, हम भी कहते हैं बनिया पार्टी है, लेकिन वो हिंदी नहीं समझती है. हम कहते हैं जनसंघ के सदस्य बनिए, वो समझती है जनसंघ के सदस्य बनिए. So that was the whole style. So दोनों वही कह रहे हैं जनसंघ के सदस्य बनिए. तो ये this was the whole thing. Janasangh was not a communal party, but somehow BJP became a communal party. और फिर हमने अटल जी पर भी आरोप लगाया कि the right man in the wrong party. तो एक बार वो उन्होंने कहा भी कि आप you are the right man in the wrong party. उन्होंने कहा कि ये तो सही है, तो फिर इस right man का आप क्या करने का सोच रहे हैं, क्या इरादा है आपको right man के बारे में. तो ये एक बड़ा अजीब सी बात हो गई कि politicization of Hindu and Muslim, इस पर ध्यान देना जरूरी है. The fourth point that I thought, you have discussed that point at length in your conclusion. It's very good, but that requires some more explanation. Is 47 के बाद, 47 के पहले ये ज़्यादा नहीं था, it was not that, but somewhere after 47, the idea Islamization was not a thing. There was the element of Arabization of Islam started in this country. I'll take another 1 minute to explain this. I was a United Nations consultant and on governance, and I was posted in South Sudan. But long before South Sudan and North Sudan became two countries, that time it was one country, two governments. So I was posted in Juba, that is South Sudan. And as we all know, the whole conflict was imposition of Sharia by the North, and the South objected to Sharia. There are so many anecdotes, I won't go into those details. But then when we were discussing those issues, our South Sudan representatives in the meetings, they would all say this one thing. They would say that we are Dinkas, that majority tribe there was called Dinka, and say we are Dinkas and we have nothing against Islam. But we don't want Arabized Islam. We are against Arabization of Islam. We have our own variety of Islam. We do this. So this whole idea where you have mentioned about page number 205 about Indianization. There is some Indianization. And if you have argued that Deen Dayal Upadhyay wrote about Indianization, it was not just Deen Dayal Upadhyay. He wrote only one paragraph on Indianization in his book on integral humanism. But there was an entire book on Indianization of Muslims by Balraj Madhok. That reference, somewhere it should have come. It was a full book. Deen Dayalji's sentence was 4 sentences. Yeah, you can come to that. So, this whole idea, I think the time has come for Indianization of Indians. Don't limit Indianization only to Muslims. Indianization of Indians is the time that has come. And if you look at it, I think from that point of view, this book becomes extremely important. That is where I think the book does not end. The book begins from that point where how do we go ahead and talk in terms of Indianization of Indians. So again, great congratulations. You have done a wonderful job. And sometimes as an author and as a professor, we always feel why we don't get students like this. Thank you.